Yes, Uncle, we can start.
Namo Ramna to all. So we'll start. शारदचन्द्रसुन्दरमुखम् ताम्रारविन्देक्षणम् भक्ताभीष्टवराभयप्रदकरम् कौपीनमोत्रोज्ज्वलम् स्वात्मानन्दरसानुभूतिविवशम् सर्वानवद्याङ्गकम् श्रीमन्तं श्रीरमणीश्वरं गुरुवरं योगासनाध्यासितं ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरम् हृदयकुहरमध्ये केवलं ब्रह्ममात्रम् यहमहमिति साक्षादात्मरूपेण भाति हृदि विषमनसा स्वं चिन्वतामच्युतव भवनचलनरोधा आत्मनिष्ठो भवत्वम्. Namo Ramana. We will commence the Friday Atma Vicharam by listening to Bhagavan's Upadesham and meditating on it. I will be reading this Upadesham from the book Ramana Answers Self-Enquiry 1900 to 1950, a compilation of all the answers given by Bhagavan on the subject matter of Atma Vichara between 1900 to 1950. The compilation has been done by our founder president, Sri A.R. Natarajan ji. We have been looking at the question answers that have been put to Bhagavan between 1936 to 1950. From that segment, we will read out whatever we meditated on the last week's question answer, mainly on the second paragraph of the answer given by Bhagavan, following which we will have a 20 minutes Atma Vichara session. Then we will have our president, Sarada Akka, talking about Atma Vichara as it has been contemplated or answered by Bhagavan and captured by Ganapati Muni in the book Ramana Gita. And after that, we will have concluding prayers to Bhagavan. We were looking last week at the 36th question. I'll read out that and the answer given by Bhagavan, and we will contemplate on that. Devotee asks, how is one to know the self? Question is, how is one to know the self? Bhagavan says, knowing the self means being the self. Can you say that you do not know the self? Though you cannot see your own eyes, and though not provided with a mirror to look in, do you deny the existence of your eyes? Similarly, you are aware of the self even though the self is not objectified. When you say, I cannot know the self, It means absence in terms of relative knowledge, because you have been so accustomed to relative knowledge that you identify yourself with it. Such wrong identity has forced the difficulty of not knowing the obvious self because it cannot be objectified. And you ask, how is one to know the self? Your difficulty is centered in how. Who is to know the self? Your duty is to be and not to be this or that. I am that I am sums up the whole truth. The method is summed up in being still. Be still. What does stillness mean? It means destroy yourself. Because any form or shape is a cause of trouble. Give up the notion that I am so and so. Our scriptures declare that it shines as I. In this answer on the question of knowing the self, Bhagwan is bringing home to us that it is not an object like any other thing that we know. It is not something that we can understand through the form of thoughts that we can say that we know the self now. It is actually a recognition, a realization, similar to the example that has been provided. One may not see the self in the sense, one may not see the I, see or know the I, but the realization that everything is seen only through the eyes makes it clear the presence of the eyes. In similar way, one is aware of everything in the waking, one is aware of everything in the dream, and the absence of everything in the deep sleep. The one awareness which doesn't undergo any transformation, and the one which continues to know when the objects are present or absent or in the mode of transit from being present to becoming absent. That awareness, that existence awareness which doesn't go any alteration and which is the only entity capable of cognizing or having the cognitivity. So, like the eyes knows everything, it is through the self that we know waking, dream, sleep, and the absence of all the three also. And that is why Bhagavan says that knowing the self is not, should not be tried or even approached in a way of knowing some relative knowledge. There should be a clear recognition that one is verily the self, and it is only by one's own self that we know everything, because one is present, all the things that we know appears to be present. Therefore, it is one's own presence, one's own awareness that has been lent on object and superimposed, believing that the object is real, object is existence, and object is aware. Really, it is oneself who exists, oneself who is capable to know. And the clear recognition that all these objects appear, remain, and transit away, but the existence of oneself, awareness of oneself, never goes through any transformation, makes it clear that knowing the self is actually being the self. It is not an intellectual understanding, it is not some knowledge that we will gain tomorrow. It is the recognition that one is already the self and one is the pure being, one is the pure awareness. Therefore, Bhagavan says that in the second paragraph, your duty is to be, not to be this or that. when we recognize that existence is my nature, not existence as a body, not existence as a thought, not existence as intellect, not existence as a limited entity called I, or not existence as world, a being in this world, but verily the pure existence, which alone can remain in the deep sleep when there is no world, no ego, no mind, no thought. None of it is required for that pure existence. When that realization happens, one recognizes that by grasping all these non-existent things like the mind mental thoughts, the intellectual ideas, the superficious ego which only appears in the state of waking and dream, one recognizes that by grasping and holding on to it, it is equivalent to superimposing the snake on the rope, on the self. And by doing so, whatever the snake seems to appear to do, like the hissing, the movement, and everything, like that, whatever the ego goes on grasping, whatever the ego goes on believing that it did it, it knew, all beings get superimposed on the self, which is pure being, pure existence. And that superimposition makes one feel that I did this, which I shouldn't have done. I I did this blunder mentally, intellectually. All of that automatically becomes a problem. Therefore, Bhagavan says, our duty is to know, not to do, but to be as oneself is. Therefore, he says, it is not our duty to be this or that, but to recognize the very knowledge that I am is the true knowledge. So, I am that I am is the pure realization of the self that sums up the whole truth, which has been very beautifully brought out in the biblical statements that when Moses asked God whom gave the message should I say to the people, then the God said, I am that I am is the right answer. That means the very presence and the awareness of one's own presence, I am, without any superimposition, is the true knowledge. That is what Bhagavan asks us to be. It sums up the whole truth, says Bhagavan. The method is summed up in be still. So Summa Iru is the real description of that. If I because the self is existence and awareness, and to remain in that state is to know, is to be. So Summa Iru is only when we stop superimposing anything on the self. When we become Summa Iru, we really stop superimposing any thought, any idea, any concept, any doing, all these multiple divisions, we stop superimposing on that stillness in that being consciousness. And that is verily being the self. That is verily can be termed as knowing the self. Bhagavan further goes to explain for us what stillness means. It means destroy yourself, destroy the non still entity. What is the non still entity? The ego. Only when we wake up with this ego as I attached to this body, identified with this name and form, it goes on identifying with many, many activities. First of all, it identifies with this form. And further, it goes on identifying with what all this form continues to do. If it knows an object, it believes that I saw it. If it did some work, it believes that it did it. Or if it is not convenient to claim that it did it, it will deny that it did it. In either way, it is going on superimposing unreal on the real stuff. So, destroying that ego, which on one side appears to be consciousness, conscious of everything, on the other side, associated with the body, believes it is the one which is doing everything. If that false entity, which appears to be conscious and believes that whatever is done by the body is done by it, if that entity goes off, let us take for a moment, examine, does body make any claim? It might have had food, it might have had innumerable breaths, it might have seen many, many good things, bad things. The eyes doesn't carry any knowledge that I saw a good thing or I saw a bad thing. Everything is in the mind, in the ego. So the Shakti, the supreme force, which is finally appeared as this body, doesn't claim anything as I. Neither does the consciousness. Otherwise, in the deep sleep, Bhagavan says that we should be concerned about whatever happened by oneself in the waking. Somebody scolded me, somebody praised me, somebody said something about me, should have all disturbed the pure consciousness. We see that there is no trace of I, no difficulty in that. So it is only this false entity, the superfluous entity called I, which is not real, which is just a mental concept, which takes the awareness to be on one side and the body to be the other side and mixes these two things up and goes on to claim in the form of thoughts as I am the knower, I am the doer, that one should be destroyed, says Bhagavan. When that is destroyed, then what we see is only stillness is present. And Bhagavan says, because any form of shape is the cause of trouble, give up the notion that I am so and so. It is only a form or a shape, either in the form of a gross body or in the form of a subtle body like thoughts and intellect or ego, that we superimpose it on the truth or become attached with it as I am so and so. If that is destroyed, then we see that the stillness alone is there, the pure being, where there is not even a single division, not even a single thought. That alone is there. And then Bhagavan says, our scripture declares that it shines as I. That is the true shining of I, uninterrupted shining of the truth. And that is what Bhagavan wants us to be. And that being is really knowing the self, not an intellectual understanding. So, therefore, to be that, Bhagavan has given us the path of Atma Vichara. Whenever this ego entity rises in the form of a thought, he asks us to diligently inquire to whom is this thought. Then the ego entity I becomes available. This is for me. And we become aware of the first and the foremost division in the undivided consciousness as a limited entity called I. And therefore, Bhagavan asks us, is this who I am? So, therefore, he asks us to inquire, who am I? And when we do that, when we trace the I back to the real source, which is the pure being consciousness, repeatedly through the searching of the source of I or through the question, who am I, tracing the I thought to its source, the self alone is found to be. With repeated practice, Bhagavan assures that the mind will gain enough strength to remain at the source. The immense grace of Bhagavan, with which alone we have come to this most direct path, let us do Atma Vichara for the next 20 minutes. Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Namo Ramana. Over to Sharda Akka.
Namo Ramana. Prostrations to Ramana, shining as the self in all beings. By the immense grace of the self manifest as Ramana, we are meditating on the path given by him, the path of self-inquiry, and we have been able to sit for the practice of self-inquiry as well. In this part of the satsang, we are meditating on the teachings of Bhagavan as revealed in Ramana Gita. Ramana Gita is a text composing of question and answers between Bhagavan and Ganapati Muni and other disciples of Ganapati Muni, which Muni compiled together in 18 chapters like the Bhagavad Gita. And these question and answers have been classified by Muni according to the subjects. In Bhagavad Gita also we have subjects, we have the theme for every chapter. Similarly, these 18 chapters of Ramana Gita also, each chapter has a specific concept. We are now meditating on the 5th chapter, which is Hridaya Vidya. Vishwanatha Swami in his Ramana Ashtotram says, Harda Vidya Prakashakaya Namaha. Now this is a special input from Bhagavan, special insight, intuition from Bhagavan based on his own experience. This Hridaya Vidya, although it is there in the Vedantic tradition as Bhuma and in another Nama, Bhagavan is hailed also as Bhuma Vidya Visharadaya Namaha. But this Hridaya, this actual definition of a Hridaya as a physical location within the body from which the power of the self manifests is very, very special to Bhagavan's teachings. And he has explained to us in the first part that though this is a speciality in his teaching, this location of the spiritual heart, however, the Hridaya is really only the source. It is the source of all thoughts, the source of the I thought, which in turn is the source of all other thoughts. So the Hridaya is the source. And he has also told us the entire story of the universe culminates in the heart. It springs from the heart and it merges back into the heart. Therefore, since it is only the source, he has said, Bhavana Kriti Varnanam. Any experience, when we think about it and then further when we talk about it, both are descriptions of the experience. They are not the experience. So it becomes a bhavana, it becomes a concept. However much we may strive to explain an experience, that explanation can only be a concept even for us, let alone to another person to whom we are presenting it. So there is this dichotomy or the distancing from the bhavana, the anubhava, to the bhavana. And that is where we are living. But we live in a world of bhavanas. We live in a world of thoughts. And why do we do so? Bhagavan says we do so because by some mysterious power, he will say in the later chapter on Shakti, he will say why this happens, how the power of the heart permeates the body. This is something which cannot be explained but must be understood through experience. The yogi, the jnani understands it through experience. However, Bhagavan does not hold himself back from explaining it, because the explanation, even though it's a concept, is an extremely helpful concept in our sadhana. This concept of the spiritual heart is a great support in our sadhana. Our sadhana, until the point of merger in the self, steady merger in the self, steady abidance in the self, until that point, our practice, our spiritual practice, keeps coming into the realm of the mind, which is bhavana. So in this realm, what will be of use to it, what will be helpful to it, is that which is recommended or given as a support by Bhagavan. And one of the most significant supports is the support of the spiritual heart. Now, giving this support, Bhagavan says that a little to the right of the center is the spiritual heart, and from there, the spiritual energy, the life force, the consciousness moves to the mind center or the Sahasrara, and from here it permeates to the whole body. And one becomes conscious of the body, one becomes conscious of the world. And one gets caught over there. Now that is the problem, says Bhagavan. Here he is telling us that it is the heart is like the sun and the mind is like the moon. That's what Bhagavan told us in the previous verse which we were meditating on. He says, Kirtyate hridayam pinde yathande bhanumandalam. Kirtyate hridayam pinde yathande bhanumandalam. Manas sahasraragatam bimbam chandramasam yatha. So the mind, the heart lights the body the way the sun lights the world. And if one is in the mind center, it is like it's our life being lit by moonlight. Now, what is the problem of the moonlight? So, one thing is that first of all, the moonlight is dependent on the sunlight. It is not its own light. The light of the mind is not its own light. If we depend on it, how can we depend on it completely? Because it is not its own light. It is not capable of supporting us at all times. Very, very easily we can see that the moon waxes and wanes. It goes up, it comes down. And this is the way of the mind. We may be surprised. One day we will be very peaceful, very happy. Anything, even some bad news comes, it does not disturb us. We feel we are absolutely in equanimity, very beautiful, everything seems wonderful. And the next day, we don't know why at all, but we are down in the dumps. We are sad. Every little thing disturbs us. We are irritated. We try to find various reasons for it. But the fact remains that it is the very nature of the mind. My father, Sri R. Natarajan, would tell me, if ever I told him, yesterday it was nice, today I don't know, I'm not even able to focus on self-inquiry or anything. He would say, that is the way of the mind. If you identify yourself with the mind, you have to become subject to the vagaries of the mind, which is going up and down like the moon. So Bhagavan says here, Yatha dadati tapanah tejat kairava bandhave idam vitarati jyoti hridayam manase tatha. So just as the sun gives light to the moon, it is the heart which gives light to the mind. But if we forget it, it's all fine. Moonlight is very good. But Hridyas sannihito martyo manah kevalamikshate. Hridi asannihito martyo. The mortals, they do not remain in the presence of the self. They do not give importance to the presence of the heart. They do not get into the presence of the heart. Mana kevalamikshate. They perceive the mind alone. असन्निकर्षे सूर्यस्य रात्रौ चन्द्रे यतामहः. Just as the moon becomes all important in the night, so in the night of ignorance in which we are living, the mind seems to be all important. But what happens is that it gets us caught in illusion. It makes us wander about in the limited framework of ups and downs, constant change, constant fall from joy, constant fall from peace, repeated cyclical experiences, again and again and again, the same kind of experiences, just like again and again, every month the moon waxes and every month the moon wanes, again it disappears, again it appears, again it seems to grow, again it seems to diminish. So Bhagavan says this is like this. Apashyam tejaso moolam swarupam satyamatmanah. Without seeing the source of light, tejaso moolam, the source of light, apashyam, without seeing, what is that source of light? Swarupam Satyamatmanaha, the true self, our true nature. Manasacha prithak pashyan bhavan bhramyati pamaraha. So the pamara, the common man, he sees everything as divided. Manasacha prithak pashyan, prithak, apart. Seeing everything is apart from himself, apart from the very self, he gets caught in this concept and he is ever wandering around. Bhavan Brahmyati, wandering in concepts, wandering in the maze of concepts. So, what is the way out? Bhagavan is indicating that one must look to this source, look to this source. So, every time a thought arises, Bhagavan has indicated to us that this is wandering in the world of ignorance. If we follow a thought, we have got into the world of ignorance. We are wandering there. We should not follow any thought, even the least bit, because it is only going to get us into the areas of darkness. It is going to keep us bound to its own supremacy. When I give importance to a single thought, I give importance to that, to the thought. I forget that the thought is absolutely powerless. Every thought is absolutely powerless. Just as moon has no light of its own, no light at all, not even a wee bit. It is merely reflecting the sunlight. And moonlight would be necessary if one is in darkness. The mind's light would be necessary if one wants to be continuously living in ignorance. If one loves the ignorance, if one loves darkness, if one loves the night, then moonlight is necessary. We all think, is not the mind necessary? Is not thinking necessary? Paul Brunton has asked Bhagavan again. So many have asked, how can I live without thoughts? Even recently, one of the devotees, he recalled a conversation he and his friend had with Mata Amritamayi. So, they are asking her, how can we live without thoughts? Don't we have to run our lives? It is like saying, how can we live in sunlight? Don't we have to carry on our activities? How can we live in sunlight? How can we live without the moon? It is only because of our ignorance. When the light for the thought is coming only from the heart, why can we not live if we are based in the heart? The limitations, all the limitations will drop away. All the boundaries will drop away. All fear will drop away. All darkness will drop away, says Bhagavan in Ashtakam. We become the unquestioned, unparalleled, single soul emperor of the entire universe. What to say of our little life, says Bhagavan in Ramana Ashtakam. ஒரு கூடை நிழற் கோவே. There will be no problem at all. So every time a thought arises, every time a thought promises to give us some solution, we must recognize that this is a mere illusion. The thought is powerless. It can give us no solution, and our lives are ample example, ample evidence for this fact. If thoughts were to give us solutions, by now we should have been emperors of the city of bliss. Because how many thoughts we have, moment after moment after moment, we are indulging in thoughts. Should we not be in bliss? Should we not be really powerful in every way? Should we not have answers to everything? But at the end of the day, neither science nor any other stream of thinking, if it is depending on thinking, has been able to provide any satisfactory answer to us. And we have not been able to abide in bliss after pursuing thought after thought after thought. I will do this and I will get a solution. I will do this and I will get a solution. I will do this and I will get a solution. Muruganatha Swami says, Ternade, Ternade, Ternade. We are like dogs, street dogs, he says. தெருக்கடை அலைந்து திரியும் நாய் போல, roaming in this street, that street, and again sniffing at some kind of rubbish. After all, what is it? What is thought? Thought is jada, says Bhagavan in Upadesha Saram. It is jada. Tat jadam hi asat. It cannot do anything. It is totally powerless. It appears to have light because of the mind throwing the light on the thought. And the eye, is it its source of own light? Is it its own source of light? It is not. It is merely reflecting the light which it gathers from the self. So every time a thought arises, says Bhagavan, let us not pursue it for any reason whatsoever, good, bad, indifferent. The best reason, the best excuse to follow thought. My mother would say, if you have a very good excuse, don't use it, she would say. Very good excuse means a very good reason. A very good reason to do something which should not be done though. That's why it becomes an excuse. So if you have a very good reason to do something wrong, don't do it, even though you have a good reason. Similarly, even if we have the best reason to pursue a thought, let us not pursue the thought. Rather, let us turn the attention back to the source, asking, for whom is this thought? For whom is this thought? The thought is for me. But who am I? Do I know who I am? Do I know who I am? Every thought gives us an illusion that we know who we are. When the thought arises, I have this feeling, right? So that feeling gives me the feeling that I know myself and I have a feeling. I have sorrow, I have joy, I have anger, I have to do something. I am involved in something. But then who is that I? Who is that I? Are we able to define it? Are we able to experience that I? When we turn round and ask ourselves, who is this I part of this whole drama of thought? Every thought is such a big drama. In this drama, who is this I? Who is this I? when we keep turning back our attention with lot of eagerness, with lot of love to see who is this I, who is this I, who is saying I, who is saying I. The thought is not I. The thought is only an experience which has arisen for me. That's why we say my thought. Very clearly it's coming and going, it's passing. So who is this I? So when we repeatedly ask ourselves this question with lot of eagerness, with lot of care, parival, says Bhagavan, when we ask ourselves, automatically it will take us back. Then the source will start getting revealed. The true light will start getting revealed. We will be turning towards that. In Bhagavan, in the later verses, in the last few verses of this chapter on the heart, will tell us how the jnani turns towards the light. That is the wisdom. The jnana is wisdom. It is wisdom to turn towards the light. So the jnani, how he turns towards the light and abides there. Such is the promise which Bhagavan is holding to every one of us in his infinite grace. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramana.
अपार सच्चित सुखवारिगाशे यस्योर्मिमात्रं भुवनं समस्तं गुहाहितं तं रमणं गभीरं चिन्ताविहीनं हृदि चिन्तयामि चिन्ताविहीनं हृदि चिन्तयामि। नमो रमण।
Namo Ramana Dileep. Thank you. Namo